I'm gonna level with you. This format is crazy. Let's get started. Welcome back, everyone. My name is Steven Rodriguez. I'm your True Champion, and before we get into anything else about today's video, I want to briefly explain that this will not be a discussion on every single archetype in the Digimon TCG as of set 1.5. That will be coming in a tier list that I'm doing later today on my Twitch channel that'll be made into a VOD later this week on YouTube. So if you are interested in my thoughts on pretty much every single deck in this format, that is where that's going to happen. Today, however, we're going to talk about my top 5 meta decks for the Digimon TCG set 1.5 format. What this means is I'm going to do sort of a comprehensive analysis, if you will, of all of the top performing decks from this past weekend's local events, online webcam tournaments like the Top Gun one that happened on Saturday, or the various European ones that happened as well. And hopefully through this analysis, I'll be able to explain to you guys why these types of decks are performing well and why other ones aren't, even though I personally believe and have said time and time again, almost any deck you can think of is viable in Digimon and can totally get wins. Especially in this format, by the way, because literally half of winning at this format is just making a judgment call and playing really well. That is a big part of it. So don't worry if your favorite deck isn't talked about, it can probably still kick some butt. If you guys are excited for the continuation of some awesome Digimon content, be sure to smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and click that bell for notifications so you know when my videos go live for you. Also, if there's anything in this video you're confused about or want me to elaborate on, do follow me over on Twitch. We talk about these kind of things all the time over there, and if you ever have a question, that's a great place to get it answered live and in person. Links to my Twitch down below, as always. But without further ado, let's talk about the top 5 meta decks in the Digimon TCG. Let's go. Alright, coming in at number 5, we have the deck that surprisingly I've had the most fun testing in this format, Blue Imperial Dramon. Blue Imperial Dramon is a super cool aggro take on the blue color, which is very refreshing to see and can be very dynamic in a lot of different situations. Through the use of Imperial Dramon himself, as well as cards like XVmon to restand and attack multiple times with jamming attackers, this deck creates a lot of aggression very quickly. And it's kind of looked at as the combo deck of the format. If you achieve a really powerful combo in like the middle of a game, you can do 6 attacks in a single turn, which is kind of insane. Now, while this deck has a lot of cool features, I do think it is probably the least popular deck on this list, and there's really 2 reasons for this. The first is that even though it is very powerful and blue is naturally a consistent color, you do only have access to very limited combo cards. I mean, there's only 4 Imperial in the deck, and if you don't draw them, it feels like you're playing a weird like level 5 rush deck that unless you draw Puppet or some other win condition, you're not going to be doing anything in that game. Because of this and some other things about the deck, people do find it the least consistent amongst the top decks, and that can kind of draw them away from wanting to use it for a bigger event. The second thing is that it kind of does have a terrible green matchup, and given that we are playing in pre-restriction time, green is just super strong, and if it high rolls, it'll never let you play the game. You have to stay in the raising area the whole time with your Imperial, and that can be very tough because you're losing out on tons of early game aggression that could allow you to chip away your opponent and need less out of you in the late game to actually kill them. So even though this deck is definitely popular, people do just have fun playing it, and it does get wins kind of out of nowhere sometimes if you draw the nuts, it is looked at as like the least consistent aggressive deck in this format. There are better options if you want to be aggressive and trying to close out games quickly, but I do think Imperial is a nice option for players to have, and we'll see a nice uptick in play once green becomes less popular post-restriction. So don't worry if you are a fan of Blue Imperial, I definitely think he'll be around to stay for the long run and might get better in the future. Coming in at number 4, we have personally one of my favorite decks on this list, Yellow Shine Greymon. Now I know in previous videos like this, I go on a big old rant about how amazing the yellow color is in general. That's not happening today. Today's rant is going to be specifically about Shine Greymon. This card is the most powerful bomb I've ever seen in my life. He can literally turn a game around in your favor out of nowhere and create a really powerful snowball effect with the powerful yellow tamers you have to just gain constant forms of advantage and board control over the opponent. This deck is very appealing to players that like to sort of outplay their opponent throughout the entire game versus just the first couple of turns, winning on turn 8 or 10 versus turn 3 or 4. And I think that's actually a really powerful kind of thing in this format, especially against decks like Rookie Rush and Red Omni, because unless those decks put you on a clock of like 6 or 7 turns, you will eventually get to a position where you can stop everything they're doing, and if they can't come back and form some kind of aggressive push against you in the late game, they're just never gonna come back because you'll just constantly gain more and more advantage on top of them until you inevitably win. Now, that being said, this deck does have some weaknesses. Similar to Imperial, it has a big problem with consistency. Finding room for sometimes 8 or even 12 tamers is very hard. You have to cut into your Digimon, and Digimon are the lifeblood of any deck in this game, and that can hurt your overall consistency game to game to game, and so people don't trust this deck as often to see them all the way through in a tournament that's like 7 or 8 plus rounds. Also, it again falls victim to the, oh, green is really popular this format and is also a bad matchup for this deck, because anything that can sort of out-tempo you, get powerful things in play fast, and then also control your board is very hard for yellow to deal with, especially since you have to spend like the first 3 or 4 turns just playing tamer cards down, and they can easily just get 6 or 7 attacks in play before that happens, and you just lose. So it is kind of difficult for yellow to deal with green, but like I said previous, post-restriction, people will be playing less green, and so this deck might see an uptick in usability. We might revisit this video post-restriction to see how different the meta decks look comparatively given the matchup spread of that new format, but for now, this is where I think yellow should go, as it is a very powerful deck, but not a very used deck. Up next, coming in at number 3, we have probably the middle ground deck of this entire format that is probably the strongest, but also probably the weakest depending on what you fight against and how you draw, and that is going to be Rookie Rush. Rookie Rush was actually the deck that I personally used myself to go X3 in this past weekend's online webcam tournament hosted by Top Cut Events. Fun fact for you, the person that actually won that event was also playing Rookie Rush, so, you know, I guess I was right about something. Rookie Rush was the call to win that event, it just wasn't going to be done by me. Now, why is Rookie Rush so good? It's basically Imperial Digimon, but without the need for any big level 6s. You just achieve a massive amount of pressure right from the get-go against your opponent, and if they can't deal with it, you'll eventually just kill them. That's a very good sort of dynamic thing to do in any single game you see, because you're always forcing your opponent to respond to you and never really caring what they do back to you. And this game, like I've said time and time again, is about statement and response, and Rookie Rush is probably one of the most powerful statement decks ever because it does it right away. Now, once again, Rookie Rush is not without its bad matchups, it's not without its sort of dedicated player base. You need to kind of think you're making the right call when playing Rookie Rush, because if you run into decks like Yellow, Mirror Match, things can get a little dicey for you every now and then, especially if you don't perfectly understand how to use the deck. There definitely is a sort of skill cap to understanding when you're in good positions or when you're in bad ones and how to react to those. Ironically, this deck's best matchup is actually green, and all the decks I talked about previous got better post-restriction. This deck might actually get a little bit worse post-restriction because of the more people playing blue-green decks for Mirror Match, or yellow that can just hard counter this if a late game situation ever comes up. So this is the first one that might actually get worse as time goes on versus better. But for now, it's coming in at number 3. Coming in at number 2, you've heard me talk about it at length today. It is probably a good definer for this format. If you can't beat this deck, or you don't know how to fight against this deck, chances are you're not going to have so much fun, but because it's getting restricted or some limitations put on it in a few weeks now, maybe that can change. And of course, I'm talking about green, specifically green Sarismon / green Tempo, whatever you want to call it. This deck is like the epitome of if I high roll, I win the game. It's kind of crazy sometimes what you can do with cards like Argamon level 5, Sarismon, Hidden Potential, Mega Gargamon, Bancho Stingmon. I can go on about how many cool cards are in green, but you get the idea. These cards do powerful things, they can control a board, and they can outright create amazingly pressuring boards against your opponent that just inevitably win you a game. I mean, if you have a deck that can put the most powerful Digimon in the game in play in terms of DP, as well as resting your opponent's units and then attacking into them, all you're doing is gaining board advantage every single turn, and eventually you're just going to have enough cards in play compared to your opponent to attack them and win the game. That's the basics of Digimon, and this deck just abuses that to the highest degree. Again, I've talked a lot in this video about how there might be some changes to this list come post-restriction. I'm sure I will do a video on it in the future, but just know for now that post-restriction, I still view green as one of the most powerful decks in the format, but a big factor that I've talked a little bit about in this video is how many people are actually playing it will determine how meta it actually ends up. Because a deck can be the most powerful deck in the game, but if no one actually plays it for an event, it's not gonna win, right? So people still wanna have the confidence to play with green if it's ever going to see some success, and I think that might take some adjustment. So in the immediacy post April 1st restriction list, I see this deck going down in popularity, which again will increase and decrease the various ones I just talked about earlier in this video. Just know that for now, I think green Sarismon Tempo is one of the most powerful decks in the game, especially if it high rolls, and the closer we get to the restriction list, you might see a bit of an uptick, but then an immediate downtick in the amount of usage, and so when you get to those events come that time, make your decisions accordingly. And coming in at number 1, honestly, this is kind of a surprise to me. I would have bet dollars to donuts that green would have been the most popular and meta deck of this format, but no, it is of course Red Omnimon. The age-old TCG trope of the known is always preferred to the unknown holds true even in Digimon. In the past few weeks, I've noticed instead of playing all these really cool combo decks or really cool Shine Greymon setup decks, people are just relying on Omnimon to do Omnimon things. And why wouldn't they? With awesome inclusions like Blitz Greymon, Biyumon, Lava Garadimon, and of course Alterest, not only add to the consistency but overall power of this deck, it honestly is just super good at winning in the Digimon TCG, and if you draw like the nuts, you can beat almost anything in this format. Red Omni by far has the least bad matchups, but it also has the least good matchups. I think overall, if you are a skill player and want to have like a good 50-50 against the majority of the field, this is definitely the deck for you, and I feel like a lot of players had that idea when going into bigger events. They're like, you know what, I don't want to metagame, I don't want a big brain, I don't want to make a call, I just want to trust that this deck will get the job done, and you know what, it definitely can. Red Omni was by far the deck that I saw the most of, and definitely heard people playing the most against, and I think that'll continue well into this format, especially post-restriction when green kind of loses favor and people are like, well, what do I play now? Let's play Omnimon. That always works. And boom, there you guys go. That'll go ahead and do it for the top 5 meta decks in the Digimon TCG set 1.5 format. And if it hasn't been beaten into your brain up until now, let me reiterate it one more time. This is one of the most dynamic formats of any game I've ever played, ever. Any one of these decks could be considered the best call for a certain event. It really does depend what you in particularly fight against and how you approach any individual matchup and how your individual deck is built to deal with said bad matchups. I don't think any deck like Red Omni, Rookie Rush, Shine Greymon, or Sarismon could ever win an event if it just fought against bad matchups all day, or if the person piloting the deck had no idea how to approach almost any scenario they are faced with. This is definitely one of the most skill-intensive and matchup-intensive formats I've ever seen. I love talking about this kind of stuff. If you guys did enjoy, don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and click that bell for notifications so you know when my videos go live for you. And again, if you have any lingering questions, be sure to hop over to my Twitch channel and ask them live and in person. I love talking about this game and talking with all of you. Links down below, as always. But anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. I have been your true champion, Steven. Please be sure to work hard, rest easy, and live well. And I will see you all next time. Peace.